Deb starts off this hour in Des Moines, Iowa. Hi, Deb. How are you?
Hi, Dave. Yes, this is Deb. My husband and I were basic followers of the Dave Ramsey way. We always had one difference. He kept wanting in his 40s and 50s to sock money away for retirement. I wanted to pay the mortgage off. Our mortgage was at a very low rate. So he thought we'd be better off paying the mortgage and earning that retirement money, getting it in those IRAs and stuff at a higher interest rate. So my one concession was, okay, before you retire then, at age 60, and he retired at 62, we're going to pay off that home mortgage, which we did. So he retired at 62. We're, everyday millionaires. I'm going to retire this year at 63. My 40-year-old son is getting married for the first time. I told him and his fiancée my one regret was we did not pay off our mortgage sooner. And my son's coming back at me with that same argument. Mom, why would I pay off the mortgage when I have a low interest rate if I can make more money putting the money into investment? So, Dave, what can I tell him?
It's going to be hard to convince him against his will. I mean, you can give him some tools, resources. Does he know about the Ramsey plan?
Basically, he does. And beyond his home mortgage, he has no other debt.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we hear this argument a lot, and it looks good on paper, but we found that when you actually do this stuff and when you survey all these millionaires with paid-for homes, none of them are going, you know what, I kind of miss my mortgage. I want to go back into debt. And when he frees up that mortgage payment, guess what he can do now? Invest way more than he was.
So,
and that's what I've been trying. Okay.
Does your husband think that he is now an everyday baby steps millionaire because he didn't pay off the house and invested the money? Does he think that's how he became a millionaire?
Question. That is a good question. I've never asked him.
Yeah. Because I think he would tell you that's not how he became a millionaire. The way he became a millionaire was he steadily invested and he controlled his expenses, and that enabled him to not only become a millionaire but also pay off the house, which added to the process. So the answer to the question is, number one, you're not going to tell a 40-year-old anything. He's going to do whatever he wants to do. So George is right. My grandmother's saying applies. Those convinced against their will are of the same opinion still. If he actually does want to engage a conversation, which it doesn't sound like he does, it sounds like you do. But if he does...
Except his girlfriend or his fiancée agreed. She kind of took my side.
She did.
So...
Okay, so we're having a good, healthy, fun family argument like the Ramseys do every meal. Okay.
Yeah, I probably do.
We all argue with Rachel about her conspiracy theories at every meal. So, okay. All right. So... you got to have some fun, right? So,
exactly.
Well, the answer to the question or the answer to the argument is several-fold. Okay,
right. Yeah.
I have approached it in my life from about 3 or 4 different angles, and every one of those angles has led me to pay off the house. The first angle I approached it from, once I went broke with borrowed money on real estate. I was a baby Christian, and I couldn't find anything in the Bible that said anything good about debt. You're a fool, you're a slave, it's unwise. It's not a salvation issue spiritually, and it's not it's certainly not even a sin biblically, but every mention of debt in the Bible is negative. So as a person of faith, I had to say, okay, my Heavenly Father says this is a dumb idea. Biblically speaking, debt is stupid. Okay, why would he say that? Because he loves me. If the best way to become wealthy is to borrow on your house and then take that money and invest it in the stock market. Okay, so that first step is I entered it through that argument. Then the next argument I entered into was this idea of risk. Debt equals risk. I think we can all agree to that. More debt equals more risk. Less debt equals less risk. No debt equals virtually no risk. And so, and you can tell that by when you say, okay, if borrowing against your house at 3% or 5% and investing it in the market in a mutual fund at a 10% rate of return, 12% rate of return, whatever, I'm making that spread. If that is an accurate mathematical formula, why would you not borrow $300,000 on a $100,000 house, you would borrow all you can up to your eyeballs if you're always going to make a 7 or an 8% spread, right?
Right.
But when you ask somebody, well, why don't you borrow $2 million that way then? That puts them in freak out mode, because when you put the absurd on the table,
no way,
it makes your emotions kick in, and your emotions are where you experience risk, not in your intellect. So your heart is where you feel risk, your head is where you do math. And so your heart starts beating like, oh God, no. Well, that's because now suddenly you're equating risk with debt, and in his discussion, he's got the debt small enough in his mind that he doesn't equate it to risk. Follow me?
Right.
So, all of that to say that in sophisticated financial circles, which your son doesn't run in, we actually are taught to adjust a risky investment with an unrisky investment, or a low-risk investment with a high-risk investment. Was actually a mathematical process for adjusting those two for risk to where you can compare them apples to apples. So the high-risk investment, after adjusted for risk, the rate of return would come down. The low-risk investment, after adjusted for risk, would come up, and then you could compare them apples to apples. And there's a statistical measure of risk called a beta, which is the measure of the hill and the valley and the frequency of the hill and the valley, and when you put it on a chart, that measures risk. If you entered that and you actually used a real math formula for your son's naive math formula that's incorrect, then you said, okay, we're taking on more risks, so we can't really count the entire spread from the mortgage rate up to the market rate as spread, because we have to adjust for risk. And when we adjust for risk, it neutralizes the benefit of the borrowed money. There's your academic answer. I gave you a spiritual answer, academic answer. Okay?
Yep.
Now let me give you one more. The borrower is slave to the lender. So that must mean slaves think differently. They have different relationships because they're not in control of their lives. They keep a job they wouldn't keep otherwise. I can't quit this job. I have a house payment. I can't tell the boss to take this job and shove it in a toxic, low-integrity situation. I have to keep the job because I have a house payment. So you keep a bad job with a bad boss until it ends up caving in on your head, and you end up making less in your life because you're forced into stuff like slaves are. You make more money, you have better relationships, you take less risk, and you make money faster if you don't have a mortgage. Your son is so wrong, it's unbelievable.